Morning, folks. You're with Ben's World here. That's Ben's World. Google that Ben's World, and then you go Postman Productions. You should be able to find my webpage easily enough. Um, I'm gonna make this super snappy because I just don't have time today. And I will come back over the weekend and actually flush this actually out with web links, with and background research. But today we just had an earthquake today in Jamaica at 7.8 on the Richter scale. Expected that was an hour ago, and expecting tsunami warning as well. Um, I've been on the last couple of days busily running around trying to grab information while doing things like actually running a business and having life. So I haven't really managed to get this out as quickly as I possibly wanted to. But before even this earthquake occurred, the gist of my post that I'm actually trying to work on is making people going back to my post. About rock, picking up rocks, looking what's actually underneath that, which I did concerning White Island. And pretty much the gist of that is I'm saying that all of the factors which I was looking at, which made me look at the White Island event to go, shit, this is pretty amazing, have basically been replicated in this particular event before this major event. The top of the list, which kind of got my attention, was there's been basically a lot of, I use the word, with the emphasis on the U for unidentified, but there's been a lot of UFO activity seen in Wales at the moment. Articles on Wales Today Live and so on, which are looking at these big, aurora-like lights that have been actually in the space, and things have been like blue lights and then shoot off at a great speed. It caught my attention because in my What's Under Rocks post beforehand, I was originally drawn to that area because 300 Starlings fell out of the sky, and then shortly afterwards there was a plane crash, which turned out to be the passenger was Professor Last, who's a specialist in GPS and a key member of the United Kingdom's Defence Scientific Committee. It's got a bit more precise name on it, but that's the core of it. And again, when I flush this out with links and posts, I'll give you all the precise information. So we're just going to go short and fast today. At the same time as that was happening in Wales, we then saw a major GPS exercise occurring in the area of Florida, which was going to cause a jamming of 125,000. In the previous post beforehand, we'd seen another couple of two events, one was the plane that went down over Birdlands Flat in Christchurch, which is where part of the HARP monitoring technology actually is located. And then we had a second one, which was a plane that crashed over in King George Island, which is also where they were actually launching, or they had a HARP facility there. That was looking at the upper atmosphere, looking at these sort of electromagnetic field anomalies that they could actually play around with, and they were very keen and interested in studying that, specifically relating to what impact it had on the GPS. Now, what I didn't quite realise at the time when I looked at Professor Last's situation was that we were seeing in New Zealand this like UFOs started to appear in New Zealand 20 or 30 at night time. Of course, they weren't actually UFOs. They were part of the Elon Musk Starlink or SpaceX program, which also goes over the United Kingdom. So they've been seeing it's on the same orbital area, and I hadn't quite clicked that connection at that time, but they're on the same orbital area. So basically, what's really the gist of that particular situation is that we were having all these sort of planes crashing out. When you lift up the rocks underneath them, you'd find that there was a lot of this GPS experimental technology and HARP related material right underneath it. The Chilean one's quite actually fascinating turn. I'll get into that a little bit more about who was on board the plane, what they were actually interested in. The fact that the Chileans have actually been studying the area over White Island, and again, as I was making my previous posts, I've been looking at that, but also looking at very strange anomaly behaviours that have been taking place in Puerto Rico, specifically we were talking about the shallowness of the earthquakes and the risk factor that it actually had causing earthquakes versus the deep ones. So again, we see at this Puerto Rico, this one that was in Jamaica and Cuba, which is that's at 10 kilometres. Now, there is in Cuba, there's another facility there very close by, which is the Arecibo, which I never pronounced properly, facility, but I understand that actually wasn't active at the moment because it had been closed down due to previous hurricane situations. So people probably, get very excited about that one, but I'm kind of putting it to the side because, as far as I'm aware, it wasn't active. Um, but yeah, we definitely have this correlation between the fact of these exercises taking place around this particular technology at these areas where these events are actually going on. A lot of this also was tied up with the fact that what they're launching into space from New Zealand, from Rocket Lab, was technology which was about monitoring that part of the atmosphere, which is what they call, couple link, which is the link between ionosphere, linosphere, Earth, and thing. And again, what professors in Japan have seen from studying from Haiti and from Japan was that this electrical anomaly has really drawn their attention. So, well, maybe we can be using this to monitor earthquake activity. Or a precursor for tsunamis, but of course, what it also indicates is the fact, or confirms what we've been saying, which is, what happens in the atmosphere has an impact upon the ground, and of course, what goes up must go down. So, while you can use it to monitor these events, it also shows you that if you're actually able to manipulate the electromagnetic field, then it's going to actually have an effect on the ground in the seismic area. Again, this is a lot of my stuff which I've been saying going back to 1995, being told, no, that technology doesn't exist, and now we have mainstream media talking about the Chinese and the Russian ionosphere and saying how, well, maybe it can be used to manipulate weather, and basically they've now gone a long way to catching up and confirming what I've already been said. They still haven't come up with what causes earthquakes, but that's only a matter of time, and especially you've got to remember that this is a case of amnesia, and that originally in the 1990s with Project Vulcan and Project Mercury, which were Russian programs, the Western media was actually pointed the finger at the Soviets, what was then the Soviets, as being involved in this technology, and a lot of that technology is actually what later on launched programs that occurred outside of the Russian-Chinese sphere of influence. So very, very interesting. There's a lot of other correlations which correlate to what happened in the White Island with what's happening in this event. I'll flush them out. I'll do a full report later on. But that's my main attention, was draw the fact that this is an area where they were actually holding that GPS jamming exercise. It's an area where I've been very interested in about it because of what was happening in Wales and what was happening in New Zealand. And while I was looking at New Zealand, I was specifically pointing the finger. So, well, actually, this is interesting. I can see a correlation between these events in New Zealand and what's happening in this Jamaica, Cuban area. So pretty much all my areas that I've been sort of saying publicly, this is the area I'm looking at, have now been largely vindicated. Earthquakes do happen. It's not every single earthquake in the world is HARP, but that's not the point. The point is I'm not looking at it from the viewpoint of a geologist or any other specialist. I'm looking at it from the viewpoint of artillery intelligence, which is when you see the same people, the same hardware, the same money trail move into a certain area and the same phenomena repeat themselves so time and time again, then that's normally a reasonably good basis for me to go to my boss when I was back in the army and say, boss, I think we got a sniper in them damn woods, which is pretty much what it looks like today. Correlating again, stressing, just short but repeating myself, is that I do believe there's very much a correlation between these events and the launch of the Starlink network, which again is about assimilating civilian GPS network or utilizing it basically for the military's purposes as well. And whereas beforehand you had things like HARP, which had to occur in one little location, with these global networks you can now use them as a global targeting network system from all around the area. So basically really opens up the scope to be able to actually use this kind of technology. And again, I think the GPS comes into this aspect because I don't think it's the thing that's causing these events, but it's really enhancing their targeting system, because now they can look all around the world and see when these disturbances and these big sort of plasma storms, which are huge amounts of energy occurring in the upper atmosphere. Those are the things that they're actually tapping in, and then they're actually redirecting. Again, the ability to redirect, because they've now got multiple antennas, is actually greatly enhanced. And of course, on top of this situation, is the very first thing that came out of Rocket Lab is the R2-3T antenna, which was launched from Rocket Lab, which is basically a great big kind of there for propagation. So it's actually boosting all the signals. And again, because they've got multiple antennas out there right now, they've got a lot more means to actually feed their juice. So basically what we're seeing is the we've gone from HARP being isolated in places like Alaska to a global network where they've been sort of doing testing and playing out, figuring out the different phenomena, to now we've actually seen effectively the launch of a global network deployed, which is now able to actually deploy effectively on a worldwide basis, with increasing regularity and precision. So I'll leave you to think about that one. A lot of stuff going to happen, I think. There's also, I should mention very briefly, there is another launch going up by the DARPA, which is people that launched the R32D2 from New Zealand on probably the next few days. It's National Reconnaissance 151, very interesting heraldry on that one as well. First time that National Reconnaissance has actually launched that kind of satellite from outside the US. Again, really points to the fact that New Zealand's very much been drawn into the United States' space war. There is very much a space war going up in there in space. It's a wonderful place for plausible deniability and to carry out stuff without the public being known, so they can go and do reprisals and you do that, I do that situations, and on a lower level. But it's still becoming increasingly active, and of course the further we launch the stuff up into space, the more it's going to get active. And of course, what's behind all that at the same time is that there's a huge drive between wanting to mine space to get particular rare metals, which again is on Earth driving the whole rare metals industry, which has been sold to us under the idea of green technologies, but it's really, that's just an excuse to build infrastructure to allow them to go into the ocean and other parts of New Zealand and actually rape and destroy that as well. So the problem that we've got is that while a lot of people are really concerned with climate change and the environment, and good on you for that, by the way, to me it's all rather irrelevant worrying about the climate when you have a massive military industrial complex out there busily doing whatever it wants, and nobody ever talks about maybe it's time to actually put these guys on a carbon leash. If you so seriously believe that that's the issue, then everything you're saying about, oh, we're going to do this to the planet and climate green change and create this green bonds and so on, it's all horseshit. It's all horseshit when you've got a military industrial complex being allowed to do whatever it wants. And until we wake up to that fact, then that whole save the planet is bullshit, because these guys have actually really, in many ways, hijacked that environmental issue, and they're using it to do something which is really Mother Nature would not like, and we need to actually own that situation. There's lots of things that we talk about climate which are very theoretical, they're very emotional. It doesn't take too much to work out that when bombs and fucking toxic metals have been dumped into the ocean, that's not good for the planet. So let's address these situations first, and I think you'll find that if we didn't actually have trillions of dollars spent on war toys and creating wars and conflicts, starvation, causing again further competition for the resources, causing further environmental destruction, then I think a large amount of what we're looking at would actually resolve itself. However, at the moment we're paying absolute token gesture of concern to that, and we're worrying about something which is being sold to us in a very theoretical manner, and I just think that that's nonsense. It's not about not caring about the planet. It's not about being concerned about climate change. I'm never going to get into that. Climate change, I'm against it, I'm for it, because I think it's really redundant to the greater issues of what's actually going on in terms of, again, there's no point fighting the planet when you're allowing water privatization to take water out of these areas, which are then causing it to be, enhance those conditions. So everything that they're saying, oh, we're doing this for the climate change, is bullshit. Actually, what they're doing is they're destroying the planet, and we need to really wrap our heads around that and say, no, your methods of saving the planet are not working. We're not disputing the fact that the planet needs to be treated better. We're disputing the issue of basically how you're going about it. And quite frankly, these guys are psychopaths, and we really need to come home to task for that. Ben Vidgen on Ben's World. Have a nice day and take care. And at the end of the day, the universe is just going to do what the universe is going to do, so don't get too freaked out about it. Just be concerned, but realize at the end of the day, no one made you the world policeman. Cheers.